So welcome. Thanks for joining. This is my AWS reInvent recap. I think this is my fifth or sixth reInvent, and what I try and do at that conference is try and absorb as much information as I can, and then sort of bring it back and replay it for our SaaS audience, essentially. You'll hear today some of the things that stood out to me in particular, and some things that stood out to my colleagues as well, who I also primed to keep an eye on the feeds. Obviously, Vegas is a silly place, and it's quite difficult to get everything done that you want. 60,000 people at reInvent, which is pretty astounding, really. So you can't really keep up with everything, but hopefully I will do justice to the things that did go on, and hopefully this will be valuable to you. So let's get into it. Obviously, before we start the recap proper, obviously the important thing that happened at reInvent is that I came back with an award. This is our logo up on the screen at Ruba Borno's partner keynote, where we picked up the SaaS SI Global Partner of the Year award, which says that we worked with more SaaS companies than any other AWS partner worldwide, which is pretty impressive considering that there's 26 of us, and we were up against the likes of, I suppose, Accenture and Rackspace, those sorts of people. So we were very proud of that, and I'm going to be insufferably referring to us as the award-winning Scale Factory for the foreseeable, and hopefully nobody gets bored of that, because I'm not going to. So today we're going to go through. I'm going to start with some stuff that is specific to SaaS partners, that are a little bit more sort of marketplace related, because the SaaS specificity stuff was not as publicly addressed. And then we're going to go through things that I or the team thought were kind of game changers, or at least worth considering in your own businesses. Some stuff on security, because we know security is a consideration for a lot of you. And we'll look at money savers as well, because cost optimization has been a theme for this year. Although in the earnings call that AWS did a couple of months ago, Jassy says he thought he saw people not thinking about cost quite so much anymore at this end of the year. Whether that's true or just something that he wanted to convince his investors of, I guess we don't know, but we will cover money savers. And then a couple of things that are just sort of interesting, might not be necessarily relevant to you and your business, but that's sort of interesting stuff that came up. I'll attempt to look at some themes that we saw this year, and summate kind of what's going on. And then to close out, we'll talk about the generative AI stuff, because it is a hot topic right now. I have mixed opinions about the Gen AI stuff. I think it's maybe less important than everybody is making out right now, but it's worth covering anyway, because AWS are obviously trying to make big noise about that in the market. So James, sorry you're going to miss that if you're jumping out, but you can catch up on YouTube later on if you like. So the SaaS specific stuff. This year, if you're a marketplace listed partner, which you'd be a technology partner in AWS parlance, if you were doing that, some good news that the price of listing a marketplace is now down. Private offers under $1 million, the listing fee is now 3%, and then that sort of goes down to 2 or 1.5, in a number of other sort of circumstances. AWS are very keen to get people onto the marketplace. If you're building SaaS today and you are not partnered with AWS, and you are not listed on marketplace, it might be worth looking at. I think my assessment of marketplace is that it's maybe only really suitable for very specific types of SaaS business, particularly those sort of security vendors and people selling things that are consumed in a way that looks like consuming AWS services. So the sort of your firewalls or your appliances and that kind of thing. But if you'd like to talk about getting on marketplace, that's something that we know a little bit about, and you can drop me a line after this and we can talk about the details of that and what's required. There's various sort of technical review stuff that you have to do to be listed, or at least to do do some co-sell with AWS, which is really the purpose of marketplace listing. But that's good news. If you are currently listed, AWS will be taking less of a margin from you as you sell through marketplace. Now, in addition, there are some new APIs for manipulating the marketplace listing. It used to be a very ClickOps thing to put things on marketplace. There are now APIs for doing that, which means that doing that at scale is much more convenient. And the other thing that was released this reInvent is something called SaaS Quick Launch. This is a mechanism by which you, as a SaaS vendor, can write some CloudFormation stacks that are then made available for your users to run through the marketplace. So let's say let's use Datadog as an example. If you're a Datadog customer, obviously, if you're Datadog and you're selling to a customer, you're provisioning some infrastructure on your side in order to ingest that customer's data and graph it and all that kind of stuff. But that customer also has to run an agent and some sort of collection stuff in their own account. SaaS Quick Launch allows for that, so the buyer in the marketplace can click on the SaaS Quick Launch, and you as the SaaS vendor can then provision some resources into that customer's account using a CloudFormation stack, which should make adoption easier for those types of workloads. There are quick launches available already in the marketplace for a number of vendors, Datadog being one of them, incidentally. But if you are selling on marketplace and you want to be part of that, that is now something that you can do as well. And in theory, we can help you with that. Although I haven't actually looked into what's involved, we can definitely have a conversation about that. So that's the really sort of SaaS specific stuff, or at least the SaaS technology partner specific stuff. Let's look now at the sort of more general things that were going on. This year, AWS launched Cloudfront Key Value Store. This is a bit of a Me Too feature, I think. Cloudflare has had storage at the edge for a little while now, but it basically allows you to read and write keys and values from Cloudfront functions if you're doing anything of that nature. Useful if you're building applications at the edge. If you've got a workload that's already using Cloudfront functions, this might be something that's useful. If you're currently a Cloudflare user, this might be a reason to look at Cloudfront again. I'm not off the top of my head sure what the sort of cost comparisons of those services are, but if you were using Cloudflare specifically because of this sort of data storage features, then Cloudfront might be a good option. My understanding from a couple of the other folks I was speaking to at reInvent is that this type of feature might also make it easier to handle certain types of authentication at the edge, if that's something that you're doing. So worth a look. Kick the tires on it. I believe that's generally available now. Actually, I meant to mark these slides up with the things that are in preview versus generally available. There'll be a bit of a mixture of the two, but if you have any specific questions, I can dive into that later on and let you know which status each of these has. So that's Cloudfront Key Value Store. There's one other thing that jumped out to us this year. All of the titles of these are terrible because AWS's naming is just an absolute mess. But log support for AWS Distro for Open Telemetry is a pretty dry title for something that is probably more valuable than it appears at first glance. So AWS Distro for Open Telemetry is a distribution that they provide with some Open Telemetry tools in, so that you can run an Open Telemetry platform either in your AWS environment or actually on-prem or anywhere else. It's a sort of distribution of software. And what adding log support does for this is allows you to set up your workloads to use Open Telemetry and ship telemetry data out to the Open Telemetry service that you're running. It's also then compatible with things like Honeycomb, Datadog, and Splunk, which are all Open Telemetry compatible endpoints. So if you're adopting AWS Distro for Open Telemetry, it means that you are keeping the door open for switching your telemetry provider to another vendor, which you might find useful in future. We certainly know a number of customers who start off with AWS native tools for telemetry, logging and monitoring, and then over time sometimes adopt a third-party tool where they outgrow what's on AWS, or they want some of the features that something like Datadog or Honeycomb provides. So this might be worth a look if you're currently not doing logging and monitoring particularly well, or you are thinking that you might want to get more out of it. This might be something to take a look at. Next up, a feature that there's a few things that AWS have released this year where you go, oh, didn't it do that already? Because it's the sort of thing that you feel like it should have done. But this is one of those, which is X509 mutual TLS authentication support for the application load balancer, which allows you to terminate X509 certificates at the ALB that you've signed using your CA, and to use that for authentication. If you do this, the ALB will send the certificate chain details to your target in HTTP headers, so you can do things in your application relative to the characteristics of the certificate that you've received, and you can get the ALB itself to do certificate verification. You can also optionally enable revocation checks as well, so it is a fully featured MTLS implementation in that regard. You can use it either with your own CA, in which case you import bits of it into AWS, or you can use private CA that you set up in AWS itself using the certificate manager. But this is probably going to be useful for people who are doing things in a secure way for enterprise. I think that the use case they talk about in the blog post for this is banking applications, if any of you are building banking applications, but if not, this sort of feature can make it easier for provisioning users in your enterprise and that sort of thing. So potentially worth a look if you're building something for larger businesses. Changing to CloudFormation this year. This is a Git synchronization feature. It's been referred to by the people that coined the term gitops on Twitter as gitops for CloudFormation, which is to say that you're essentially able to hook your CloudFormation stacks into a Git repo. So at the moment, or prior to this, if you wanted to change your CloudFormation stacks, you'd dump them into an S3 bucket and point your CloudFormation run at it. With this feature, you can store your CloudFormation in a Git repo, whether that's GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or one of the AWS Git services, and the feature will sit and watch your Git repo and apply CloudFormation as that changes. So if you're CloudFormation users, that's probably going to make your life a little easier, because you've probably, if you will have had to build something to do this, probably using code commit or something, or maybe a GitHub action that takes some of the, what AWS like to call the undifferentiated heavy lifting out of doing that. So worth a look if you're CloudFormation users. We do quite a lot of CloudFormation in our control tower delivery, so I imagine we'll be looking at that for what we're doing there. So certainly a time saver for many, I would imagine. Another logging and monitoring story here. This is agentless EKS collector for Prometheus metrics. So if you're using the AWS, the Amazon managed service for Prometheus, then you can now, by using this, fetch data about your applications out of your running EKS cluster straight into Prometheus without all of the sort of messing about that you would otherwise have to do. That's application metrics and node metrics, in fact. Any metrics that are exposed inside EKS, you'll be able to pull into the Prometheus collector. You would otherwise have had to run Cortex or do some undifferentiated heavy lifting to do that. So if you are today using Kubernetes on AWS along with Prometheus, this might make your life a bit easier as far as data collection is concerned. Change to AWS backups now allows you to automate periodic restore tests for your backups. If you are today storing data on AWS and you are not using AWS backup, I would encourage you to take a look at that. And if you are today using AWS backup for your data integrity reasons, but you're not testing your backups periodically, this now removes your last excuse for doing that, because it can now be automated. Really important if you're in a sort of governance and compliance model where you want to be able to provide evidence that you are testing your backups. Obviously, you'll be able to do that from the output of this service. So worth taking a look at if you are using AWS Backup, and if you are not using AWS Backup, I'll encourage you to have a look at that as well. Another big one for people who are using Aurora at scale. This is Amazon Aurora Limitless. I think that the official title is actually Amazon Aurora Limitless Database. You can think of it essentially as sharding for Aurora, but taken care of by the platform. So you can scale Aurora up to millions of writes per second across petabytes of data with this feature, apparently, and all of that is taken care of by the platform itself. I haven't looked at the costs for some of these. I should probably dig into that. But if you're doing things with Aurora and you're having to think about high scale stuff, then this is probably worth looking into. A serverless version of Elasticache was released at reInvent this year. This is I know this was on the Christmas list of one or two of the folks we've worked with on account of how Elasticache is quite fiddly to get set up and feels like the sort of thing that there should really have been a serverless version of much longer ago. But it's out now. It's a highly available, scalable cache implementation. Works with both Redis and Memcached in the same way that Elasticache does, and this removes the need for you to manage the capacity of that cache. So it's all taken care of by the platform, giving you one fewer thing to worry about. So I think we're sort of getting to the point now where you can probably run pretty much any application on AWS now without the need for worrying about managing servers at all, with all of the things that are on there. But in particular now, this is taking care of the caching situation. We know that a lot of the customers out there are using Redis or Memcache in this way, so hopefully useful to you as well. So that's the game changers. A bit of a lofty title. Whether they change the game for you, I don't know, but certainly some things to look into if you are figuring out your 2024, I guess. So let's look at some security stuff now. We obviously mentioned the X509 certificate stuff for ALB already, but some other stuff out this year. Some new controls in Control Tower for digital sovereignty. I think when AWS is talking about digital sovereignty, they're talking about you as a customer having complete agency about everything about your data. I think a lot of people talk about digital sovereignty with a very sort of data residency and geography lens on it. I don't think AWS are necessarily thinking only about that, but a number of these controls really are about regional restrictions and about cutting down on things that permit you to export data from regions and that sort of thing. There are 65 new controls as part of Control Tower that are grouped under digital sovereignty, but they've also created a new grouping. If you're familiar with Control Tower, they have there's a list of controls, and these are grouped under either specific types of control or controls that relate to particular compliance regimes. They've created a new grouping here called digital sovereignty. This is all part of their digital sovereignty pledge, which is something that they talked about last year, around in particular the creation of a region that is not legally connected to the US, which is sort of how Azure have been doing things in Germany, which ought to make it a little easier for particularly picky customers in Europe to adopt the cloud, or to adopt AWS's cloud, I should say. This is all sort of part of that story. There are currently 245 or more controls grouped under digital sovereignty in Control Tower, many of which are also under other groups, but there are 65 new controls on top of that, and you can go and poke around in Control Tower and look at what they are. I think that's all I have on there. Moving on, S3 access grants. This is something that I know some customers do, which is to grant their corporate users access to S3 buckets for manipulating files, either as part of a data lake or for sort of content management and that sort of thing. Used to be the case that if you wanted to do this, you'd have to build a sort of token vending machine using your IDP and then sort of using those those tokens to give you access to S3 identities. Now you can do this as a native part of S3 with a little bit more control over it. So you can map your IDP to a particular data set in S3, and all of the access that's then generated through that mechanism is logged through CloudTrail. So this is going to be particularly useful if you're doing a lot of stuff with S3, or if you've got end users in your organization who are not technical users working with S3. This will probably make life a bit more secure for you if you're doing that sort of thing. An extension of GuardDuty runtime monitoring. This is a service that's been available for EKS up to this point, which is to say that you, once installed, GuardDuty watches for things that are running on the hosts that your workloads are running on, keeping an eye out for things that look unusual or dodgy. And they, as of this reinvent, it's now possible to run an agent on an EC2 instance if you're still running any of those, and for that to give you visibility into things that are happening on that host, things that are happening in the operating system, and to flag alerts if something weird is going on. So if you're currently paying another vendor for that type of on instance security story, it may not be necessary to do that anymore, which I'm sure made all of the security vendors who were sponsoring reInvent really happy. But such is the march of progress. So worth a look if you are still running some EC2 instances and your EC2 security story is not fully up to scratch. Money savers now. Or at least things in general in the FinOps or cost management space. I pulled this into this section because it's although it's a change to AWS config, AWS config can get pretty spendy if you're making significant use of it. It used to be the case that config would bill you for, well, it's still the case that config will bill you on a number of checks basis. So when a check is run, there's a cost associated with that, which means that it can be a bit of a sort of bit of a billing surprise from time to time. We've definitely deployed controls out for customers who've winced a little bit on month one when their bill came in, particularly those doing things fairly ephemerally with instances where config is running every time they're started and stopped. This change allows you to check on a period rather than on change, which means that you can look at your resources daily, for example, and therefore only pay for those config checks every 24 hours per resource, which is going to help you save money with config. Depending on your security posture, daily might be sufficient. You might want to do it more often than that. For certain types of resources, you might want to stick with the on-change stuff, but this will save you some money if you are an AWS config user with medium to low security concerns in that area. Another change relating to cost, there is now a unified billing and cost management console. The console experience on AWS as a whole is a mixed bag, I think, depending on which bit you are in. But as of this year, this is reInvent, there is now a unified view of both billing and cost management in the same place, which features a new homepage with insights and recommendations, and allows you to identify problems with cost and so forth in a sort of single dashboard. And I say single dashboard, obviously I mean one single dashboard of many other single dashboards that you have access to in the console. So I think there's still maybe room for improvement there, but this is definitely a welcome change, and one that has the Corey Quinn seal of approval, which is always a good sign in the cost landscape. There's also a cost optimization hub. As I say, there are many single panes of glass through which you can look at cost things, and this is a dashboard for cost optimization recommendations. Now, most of the hubs on AWS are geared up to allow you to see these sorts of things across multiple accounts if you're running an organization's layout. Cost Optimization Hub is no different here. Give you details about right sizing of instances, some recommendations around Graviton, which is a good way of saving money if you haven't looked at replacing some of your services with Graviton instances, idle resource detection, and so forth. So the hubs are places that aggregate data from other services, essentially, rather than being a product in of themselves, as a security hub and a reliability hub and other things, all of which are useful ways of running multiple accounts from a single location. It is now also possible to export billing and cost data in a cleaner way. Now, you might be familiar with the cost and usage report, which is a big, horrible CSV that lands in your S3 bucket. This change allows you to pull out or to have delivered files into S3 that have been filtered in some way using a form of SQL interface. And so I think from a SaaS perspective, this could be interesting because you'd be able to use this to filter out on a cost per tenant basis. If you wanted to, if you're billing your SaaS customers on a usage basis, this might make your life a bit easier. But it's probably more accurately geared up towards enterprise businesses where there are many different teams or cost centers all using a sort of sprawling cloud estate. This probably makes it easier for you to generate a sort of per cost code report or a per department report. But again, worth digging into if cost attribution is a challenge for you right now. And related to that as well, it's now easier to export data from the cost and usage report into a QuickSight dashboard. AWS have recognized that rather than throwing money at vendors for cost management tooling, actually a lot of customers now are shipping that data into QuickSight for slicing and dicing in there. QuickSight being AWS's BI tool, and it's now easier using this feature to ship cost data into QuickSight for that level of analysis. I always look forward to Verr Vogel's keynote at reInvent. His is usually fairly pretty technical and interesting. I think Verr is one of the few sort of technical leaders in the space that I kind of keep an eye on and respect to some extent, because his background is a little similar to mine, but obviously at a greater scale. Also, this image here is Verr. It's not me. I know there's sort of similarities there with the artist, but Verner's keynote revisited a topic from 2012 and looked at costs to some extent, and he provided a number of laws of managing cost on the cloud, all part of a book that he presented on stage called The Frugal Architect, which you can now go and look at and dig through those laws, and some good guidelines in there. I think if you've got cost as a concern in your business and it's not sufficiently a concern in your teams, this could be a pretty good teaching tool. Use the wise words of Verr to guide people into thinking the right way about cost management. So some of the things that piqued our interest but might not be immediately relevant. There are some new chips available. For those of you who don't know, AWS acquired a chip design company called Annapurna Labs. I can't remember what it was, but sometime in the last decade, and design and build their own silicon now. The hypervisor that AWS runs on, Nitro, is all built on hardware created by Annapurna, and they've also created their own CPUs, as are other vendors. If you're a Mac user, for example, you'd be familiar with the M1, M2, and now M3, I suppose, chips. Those are customized ARM cores. Most of AWS's, actually, in fact, all of AWS's chip fabrication is ARM based as well. They announced the Graviton 4 at reInvent this year. There's now an R8G instance type in preview, which is a Graviton 4 based instance. Graviton's been designed based on data collected about how workloads run on AWS, and so they've optimized the price performance ratio around specifically the types of things that people are running on the cloud, and so typically you can save money by using Graviton so long as you can convince your applications to run on ARM, which is increasingly easy these days, to be honest. And Graviton 4 is a step in that direction. I think this is a sort of 2x or 3x price performance increase over the previous generation, and significantly cheaper per performance measure. I can't remember how they're specifying this than the sort of Intel and AMD options. So it's worth noting, even if your workload itself can't run on a Graviton chip, things like Elasticache, RDS, etc., you can choose Graviton instances to run your data services on. So if you're not currently running your data services on Graviton, you are looking for cost optimization opportunities, that could well be one of them. There are also two other types of chips that AWS have built that you can run instances on. One is called Inferentia, which is a chip designed to be optimized for machine learning inference activities, and Trainium, which is designed for training activities, and they launched Trainium 2 reInvent this year, representing a performance increase in ML training workloads. So if you're doing training of ML models and you're not using the Trainium stuff, that's probably worth a look, particularly if you are cost sensitive right now. This release, the Amazon S3 Express One Zone, sounds a bit like a 90s boy band. I can hear the key change already kind of echoing in my ears there. It's not a boy band. This is a new S3 storage tier that most people probably won't need, because it is optimized specifically for low latency activity, and most of us don't really have that requirement in our architectures. But this is a single availability zone, low latency storage tier, which comes with some other sort of interesting changes that I think we might expect to see in S3 as a whole in future. Not entirely sure, we'll see. But in particular, you might know that S3, when you're storing data in S3, you're typically doing it on a key basis. And there's no real sort of hierarchy to that. You can impose a hierarchy in how you split your keys up, but as far as S3 is concerned, there isn't really a hierarchy there. This bucket type is a new directory bucket layout. There is actual hierarchical storage in here, which is a departure. And also, when you're working with this storage tier, you have to create a session in your SDK, and then you use that session throughout your object access, which is one of the reasons it can be so quick. So this is I think sub millisecond access, and the use cases they're thinking of here really are things like video editing, like real-time video editing, and that sort of thing, where most of us are probably not doing that. But interesting to know about, and it might presage some future changes to S3 that may or may not be interesting. Another thing that caught my interest this year, in part because I hadn't noticed that these already existed, which is EventBridge partner integrations. EventBridge is a sort of it's a bit like an enterprise message bus in that it's a message bus essentially that takes structured data. So unlike SQS, where you can just kind of dump anything on there, EventBridge actually has object schemas and that sort of thing, and so you are that's enforced by EventBridge itself. So things are validated as they go onto the bridge. We use it quite a bit in our control tower deployment, where we're passing messages around between different accounts in the management area versus the workload area. But EventBridge also provides for partner integrations, and right now you can, as of last week, integrate with Adobe tooling and with Stripe, and there's a bunch of other integrations there that I hadn't noticed were there previously, with things like Datadog, PagerDuty, and Freshworks. So if you are using have a look at the list of integrations that exist. If you're using those tools, there might be some value to be had by digging into those integrations. I'd imagine PagerDuty, for example, will let you know as an EventBridge event when something's gone wrong, and that might be useful for pulling into your you're logging and monitoring information, maybe pushing into any of the tooling that you're using for your compliance regimes. So I just found that interesting. I think EventBridge is an underrated part of AWS. I think it's relatively recent. Not everybody we talk to is aware of it or has been using it. I think it's pretty cool, so worth a little look. Another thing that came out that caught my interest, thin client for Amazon Workspaces. I know that's in the particularly in the compliance world. Some of our customers use Amazon Workspaces, which is their RDP setup, to allow their employees or their contractors to access data on their platform, but through an RDP interface. So it's never actually exported onto onto physical machines in their homes or their offices. There is now a hardware thin client for that, which means you can access those workspaces inexpensively from a single cheap bit of hardware rather than shipping everybody a laptop. So if you are currently using Amazon Workspaces, this might be a way to go. The internet suggests that these are rebranded Fire TV bricks, which I don't know whether this is an opportunity to sell hardware that wasn't otherwise being sold, or just a sort of smart person reusing SKUs for other things. But either way, they're there. You can have a look at them. I don't know how much they are. They'll probably be pretty cheap, because these things don't really need a lot of grunt. And in case any of you are planning on using Project Kyper for your connectivity, this is Amazon's low Earth orbit satellite network, similar to Elon Musk's Starlink. They announced, I think this was this in Werner's keynote, I think, or maybe Zalipsky's actually, that users of Project Kyper will be able to pass data privately to their AWS accounts over that network. So if you are looking after farms full of IoT equipment that are very remote and that you're accessing the internet over Project Kyper, that seems to be a workload that they're thinking about, then you'll be able to pass data privately to your VPCs over that. I guess it's nice to see other billionaire organizations putting internet satellites in space, so that Musk doesn't have a complete monopoly on whether war zones have access to the internet. Other than that, it seems like a massive expense to go to. But I'm also stuck rurally with a maximum of 40 megabits of fiber to the cabinet, so there's a non-zero chance that I'll get some satellite internet in future, and that's more likely to be Amazon's offering than Musk's, I think. So some themes for this year, like what are the sort of the big picture stuff? Well, I mean, I think always in the cloud we are heading towards a greater level of serverlessness. I think if you are running new applications today and you're having to patch operating systems and feed and water instances, I think there is an opportunity to not do that, and the cloud vendors are obviously keen for you to adopt those because there's a bit more margin in those for them. I think I looked at just figured out EC2 versus Fargate. There was something like maybe 30% more cost to run that, which represents what you're paying the cloud vendor to take care of that nonsense for you. So we'll continue to see that trajectory, I think, and a world in which you have to worry less about things like capacity planning and thinking about availability and so forth. We also, I haven't really talked about the data stuff. There was an entire keynote on ML and data that it's not really my area of expertise, so I don't really feel qualified to talk about it, but a whole bunch of changes to Redshift and a whole bunch of changes to SageMaker, and a lot of the stuff in the data realm seems to be about removing janitorial work. So a lot of you, if you're doing data warehousing or other kind of data processing, you might well be shifting data out of relational stores into something else for that type of work. And there is a bunch of stuff going on at Amazon to prevent you from having to do ETL yourself, basically. Data from Aurora Postgres, RDS MySQL, DynamoDB now zero ETL shiftable or queryable from Redshift and OpenSearch and other things. So probably your life will be over time made easier if you are doing things with large data sets and currently shuffling them around. And of course, generative AI, all the things, which was the big topic this year. I've got a sort of maybe a 5-slide recap deck from AWS listing all of the URLs of the blog posts that they put out during reInvent, and one entire slide is generative AI because they're very keen to be seen to be doing generative AI. So let's dive into that very quickly. This year we've seen Amazon Bedrock released, which is their tooling for running foundation models in the cloud, and these are models such as Claude. There's Llama in there. There's Amazon's own Titan models and so forth. I think Amazon are betting on choice being a differentiator. So where the likes of OpenAI, well, I guess Azure are backing OpenAI. That's a single model, single service. Amazon's play is we've got all the models. Well, not OpenAI's models, but we've got a number of models you can choose from, and we can secure them. That's the sort of that's the thing. So this year's reInvent. Obviously, Bedrock was announced earlier in the year and has been available for a little while. There are now, as of reInvent, more models available. So the latest Llama model from Meta, Claude 2.1, is available as of last week as well. You can also now use, I think this is in general availability, you can use Bedrock to build agents. And a Bedrock agent is one that can take natural language instruction and turn that into the running of a sequence of lambdas. So you can build your own agents that do things with actual data in your own infrastructure using that tooling. I haven't seen any of that in action yet, but it sounds kind of interesting. Bedrock also, as of last week, supports batch inference if you're doing things at scale, and there's a new feature for evaluating models where you can run the same prompt against multiple models provided by Bedrock and see what the results are like. So if you want to figure out performance comparisons or quality comparisons, the tooling is now there and easier to do for that. You can also now fine-tune models using data in S3. So this isn't all the models. This is definitely Titan. I'm not sure about which others it supports at this stage, but essentially you can stick a load of data in S3 and point your Bedrock at it and use that to fine-tune your model. And of course, costs may vary if you're doing that. Fine-tuning can be a spendy endeavor. Also this year we saw Code Whisperer, which is a tool for generating code. It's been trained on corpus of open source projects and also code within Amazon itself. I took this for a test drive last week and used it to write some Python, which is a language I don't really know very well, and it was pretty helpful in that regard. I haven't really compared this with the GitHub Copilot offering and so forth, because that's not something that I've tried yet, but it seemed competent. The thing that I think Amazon are really pushing on their generative AI stuff is the security and auditability of these things. So Code Whisperer, everything that comes out of that model is logged in a CloudTrail. And anything that they compare the code that comes out of it against the data that they use to train the model, and so it can tell you if it has spat out code that is verbatim from one of those sources. So you can go and look and see whether or not that's appropriate code for your use from a licensing perspective. So possibly a little more enterprise thinking than most use of CodePilot, but kick the tires, see what you think. I found it useful. It's $19 a user a month or something at the basic level. Not a huge amount of money for the kind of feature set. The other thing that is going on in the AWS ecosystem that supports generative AI workloads is they are working to add vector search to a lot of the services that are out there storing data. So Amazon OpenSearch Serverless, Amazon MemoryDB for Redis, Amazon DocumentDB, and there's a vector database called Pinecone that you can access through the AWS marketplace if you want to run that on your platform. Vector search capabilities are useful for retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So if you're doing that in your applications, that's where you're using the generative model to vectorize language that you're putting into it, and then use those vectors as a search term to pull related data out. It's how you can get a generative AI platform to give you information from a data set that you've provided it without hallucinating anything, is my understanding. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm trying to stay up to date with it. But vector search seems important for some types of generative workloads. In addition, SageMaker Hyperpod was launched last week. That's a horribly named service which is designed for training at scale large language and other ML models. It allows you to take a training workload and split it up across thousands of accelerators, and then deal with failure and resume from checkpoints if there are failures that happen, and so forth. So betting big on allowing people to train their own models or fine-tune their own models using SageMaker. And then the final thing that was released at reInvent and was kind of a theme through a lot of stuff is something called Amazon Q. It's honestly not very good at this point. They've sort of using the the product name of Q to cover a number of generative AI features across a number of AWS products. So you can think of it as in the same way that Microsoft are talking about Copilot, Amazon are going to be talking about Q. And currently, if you log into the AWS console, Q is going to pop up like an annoying Clippy and try and help you. It's currently answering questions in a fairly mediocre, wrong way. It has all of the kind of hallmarks of something that was a little bit rushed out. But I think you don't sleep on AWS's ability to iterate and release features, right? I think if nothing else, AWS is a powerhouse at making change, and so it won't be long before Q is actually not bad. Right now, it looks like a tech demo. To be fair, it's in preview, so they've got the get out of that. But don't trust anything Q is telling you in the console right now, because some of it is wrong. It's also integrated into QuickSight and Amazon Connect. Now, both of those tools had ML features for supporting what's going on in there. QuickSight had natural language query generation. Amazon Connect had some stuff around augmenting your human agents with the ML stuff, and QuickSight and Connect now have Q features in that place, so not a big difference from where it was, I guess, just maybe different technology driving it. The Redshift query editor now uses Q. You can ask it to generate you a query in natural language, and it'll spit out some SQL. So that's probably going to be quite useful for less technical data wranglers in your organization. And AWS Chatbot, which is a tool that we currently use for shipping alerts out of things like Guard Duty and into Slack or Teams. Chatbot also allows you to interact with your AWS platform through a chat interface. Q has an integration with Chatbot, which is either in preview or generally available now. Whether you want to let it loose on your systems, I don't know, but it's there. And there's also an integration with VS Code. So my tinkering the other day with Code Whisperer, I also hooked it up with Q, and so in my VS Code interface, I had Code Whisperer augmenting the stuff that I was typing in my editor window, and Q alongside to answer questions about how do I do such and such a thing in Python. I had a reasonably good experience with it there, but the asking it things about AWS in the console doesn't seem to be quite as good as that. So Q is going to improve. AWS is going to be talking about it a lot. I think realistically, AWS are very keen to be seen as a leader in generative AI. I don't agree, I think, but I don't think they're too far behind, and I think they are certainly in a position where they'll be able to catch up. They're throwing resources at it, and it is a massive focus for everybody. reInvent was covered in it. I think 20% of the sessions that happened at reInvent mentioned generative AI in their title somewhere, regardless of how actually generative AI related it was. And those were the sessions that sold out. So there's clearly an appetite for it as well. But that was my perspective on the Gen AI stuff at reInvent. So. Lots of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff in there that I haven't covered today. If you have any specific questions about specific services or specific changes that you were hoping you might see and haven't seen arrive yet, I can be more than happy to answer those. But thanks for joining me today as I wrap up my busy week in the desiccating, horrible place of Las Vegas, which I'm still broadly recovering from. Thanks for joining.